The global transition to generative AI is triggering a rapid, energy-intensive build-out of digital infrastructure. To train large language models and process billions of operations daily, developers are deploying monolithic, hyperscale campuses under aggressive schedules, driven by lucrative contracts and strict deadlines. You can see the scale of this footprint in Memphis, Tennessee, where the xAI Colossus facility was constructed directly adjacent to residential zones. But the residents living next to these campuses aren't complaining about blocked views. They are reporting a continuous 24-hour acoustic trauma, a relentless low-frequency hum and physical vibration that penetrates their homes. Yet, when municipal authorities investigate, these massive facilities routinely pass local noise ordinances and secure all their necessary permits. On paper, they are completely compliant. The gap between legal compliance and the severe distress experienced by neighborhoods comes down to a specific type of acoustic pollution, low-frequency noise and infrasound. To understand exactly what is happening to these communities, we have to look past basic zoning laws. We have to examine the physics of sound waves, the mechanical failures of our measurement tools, and the biological response of human cells. As hyperscale facilities multiply, a growing body of evidence suggests our digital future is colliding with the physical biology of the communities hosting it. Inside these data centers, densely packed server arrays generate an immense amount of heat. To keep specialized microchips from melting, operators demand absolute thermal stability. That stability is maintained by massive industrial cooling infrastructure, relying on sprawling yards of chiller fans to constantly pull the heat out of the facility. As these large fan blades slice through the air, they create severe aerodynamic turbulence. A standard 6-bladed cooling fan naturally generates a powerful, synchronized, low-frequency tone, typically producing a massive spike at exactly 118 Hz. Most high-frequency noise behaves like small ripples on a pond. It dissipates quickly over distance and is relatively easy to block. But low-frequency and infrasonic waves behave very differently. A 20 Hz sound wave is over 56 feet long. It acts less like a ripple and more like a massive ocean swell. This length makes these waves subject to a physical property called acoustic diffraction. When a 56-foot wave encounters a standard property line sound wall, it doesn't bounce off. It simply bends over and flows around the obstacle, continuing its path with virtually zero loss of amplitude. Because standard building materials offer little resistance to these long waves, the low-frequency hum easily passes right through the walls and roofs of nearby homes, turning the enclosed rooms themselves into resonant acoustic chambers. And the cooling systems aren't acting alone. Facilities frequently rely on extensive arrays of natural gas turbines and standby diesel generators for backup power, which inject a deep, engine-firing drone directly into the concrete and earth. Traditional architectural boundaries are physically incapable of containing this kinetic energy, leaving residential zones entirely defenseless against the physics of long-wavelength sound. So if these waves are easily penetrating homes, local environmental protection agencies and zoning boards should be stepping in. But they rely on noise ordinances drafted decades ago. The core metric used in almost all of these regulations is the A-weighted decibel scale, commonly known as dBA. The dBA filter was originally designed to mimic the physiological sensitivity of the human ear, which evolved to be highly sensitive to mid-range frequencies, like human speech. This chart shows the raw acoustic output of a data center, but when you apply the dBA filter used by regulators, it acts as an aggressive mathematical low-cut filter, removing the low-frequency data from the final measurement. A powerful 31.5 Hz drone is automatically reduced by an astonishing 39 decibels on paper. The sound is physically there, but legally it's invisible. During the day, ambient traffic might mask some of this hum, but because hyperscale facilities operate continuously, the drop in nighttime background noise transforms this low-frequency droning into an inescapable 24-hour presence. Some jurisdictions are recognizing this failure. Advanced metrology standards, like the UK's BS 4142 or Germany's DIN 45680, mandate precise third-octave band analysis and apply strict numerical penalties for these continuous industrial hums. Data center operators can claim full compliance because the tools used to measure them ignore the exact frequencies that cause the most harm. Corporate advocates frequently dismiss community complaints about this noise as an aesthetic annoyance or a psychosomatic response, but the clinical data shows a direct impact on human biology. Medical professionals have identified a clinical cluster of symptoms known as wind turbine syndrome. Prolonged exposure to high-amplitude infrasound physically disrupts the vestibular system deep within the inner ear, causing severe vertigo, nausea, and profound sleep deprivation. Beyond the inner ear, there is a more severe systemic pathology documented in exposed populations, vibroacoustic disease. To understand how a sound wave causes disease, we have to look at mechanotransduction. Human cells don't just rely on chemical signals, they also communicate and regulate themselves using mechanical, physical signaling. Chronic exposure to extreme low-frequency vibration disrupts these mechanical pathways. This triggers the abnormal proliferation of extracellular matrices, specifically driving the overproduction of proteins like collagen. This excessive cellular growth leads to a dangerous non-inflammatory thickening of vital tissues, including blood vessels and cardiac structures, permanently restricting blood flow. In heart muscle cells, known as cardiomyocytes, infrasonic exposure physically disrupts calcium homeostasis, tearing apart the delicate coupling mechanisms required for healthy cardiac function. Under the force of continuous pulsing external waves, infrasound induces programmed cell death, or apoptosis. It upregulates proteins like BAX, while simultaneously suppressing the exact proteins needed to keep the cell alive. In rigorous double-blind clinical trials, subjects exposed to an invisible infrasound mimic reported a nearly 300% increase in subjective physical torment, alongside extreme spikes in anxiety and depression compared to the control group. Low-frequency noise is a potent mechanical force. It physically degrades human tissue and cellular stability, leaving lasting damage long after the sound itself has stopped. When faced with community anger, developers usually resort to a brute force architectural response, spending millions of dollars to construct colossal physical sound walls and acoustic baffles. But this creates an engineering paradox. Those sound-absorbing baffles physically restrict the critical airflow the servers need to stay cool. Because the airflow is choked, the cooling fans must spin faster to compensate. And because aerodynamic noise scales to the fifth power of the fan's speed, forcing a fan to overcome a physical barrier exponentially worsens the low-frequency noise at the source. The solution isn't to block the air, it's to smooth it out. By installing custom aerodynamic modifications, engineers eliminate the internal turbulence. The fans can move the same volume of air at a much lower speed, shrinking the low-frequency wave by up to 99%. For any remaining airborne noise that escapes the site, facilities are turning to active noise cancellation arrays. Highly sensitive microphones detect a specific tonal spike, and an ANC speaker instantly broadcasts an exact 180-degree anti-phase wave. When the two waves meet in midair, they cancel each other out through destructive interference. Finally, to stop ground-borne tremors, engineers must utilize heavy-duty spring isolators to physically separate the massive chillers and generators from the building's concrete foundation. Achieving true acoustic mitigation requires passive barriers and implementing active, source-level engineering that eliminates noise while increasing energy efficiency. The massive demand for computational power is generating a physical byproduct that our current laws cannot measure and our traditional walls cannot stop. Beyond the issue of property values or neighborhood quiet, chronic low-frequency exposure acts as a measurable driver of systemic disease and cellular trauma. Environmental protection frameworks must immediately abandon the exclusive use of the mathematically flawed dBA scale and adopt rigid tonal penalties like those outlined in BS 4142. Hyperscale developers must abandon passive, airflow-restricting sound walls. They need to implement active aerodynamic modifications and full structural decoupling as a baseline standard for all new construction. The energy-intensive growth of artificial intelligence can only expand sustainably if the engineering that supports it respects the physical biology of the human communities it purports to serve.